You're listening to the Oilers Nation pregame podcast brought to you by Yag Burger. Here's your host, Tyler Yaremchuk.
Welcome into the Oilers Nation pregame podcast brought to you by Yag Burger and Nation Beer with the Battle of Alberta. When you're supporting the local team, why not support local at the same time? Check out Yag Burger, pick them up for dinner this weekend. On the other hand, why not pick up some Nation Beer as well? If you're down in Calgary, you might find it in Flames colors, but up here in Edmonton, you can pick up a 4-pack of Nation Beer in Oilers colors from your local liquor store. It is Battle of Alberta Part 2 tonight as the Oilers take on the Flames. It's the 10-8-0 Edmonton Oilers taking on the 8-7-1 Calgary Flames, and there is not a lot separating these two sides in the North Division standings. It is a big game, but we know every game between these two is going to be huge this season. The Oilers, of course, lost meeting number 1 between these two clubs early on a couple weeks ago, but we're not going to dig into that quite yet. Let's go back to the Oilers win over the Jets on Wednesday, and it was a much-needed victory. They could not, honestly, they could not afford to drop 2 straight against the Jets like that. Right now, when you're going up against these teams, the bare minimum you need to be doing is grabbing the split. If you can pick up a couple sweeps along the way, that's going to go a long, long way in making sure you're comfortably in the playoffs. But if you want to make the playoffs, you need to be at least grabbing a split every time you get one of these 2-game sets. So credit to the Oilers for finding a way to get the job done and picking up the 2 points against Winnipeg. The numbers weren't as pretty as they were in the loss to Winnipeg on Monday. But they found a way to get the job done, and really, it was 2 things. It was early offense, and it was goaltending. I mean, Connor McDavid gets his 500th point, just a couple of minutes into that hockey game, and nice feed to Jesse Puljujärvi. And, man, if you would have told me a year ago that Jesse Puljujärvi was scoring goals like that, or would be scoring goals like that in the NHL, I'm honestly not sure if I would have believed you. Like, he's taken such a big step forward here in his return to Edmonton, and not even that, just since he got moved up to that McDavid line, he's taken such a big step forward, and just a beauty from Puljujärvi. That was 3:45 into the game, and I mean, while we're caught up in the excitement of McDavid's 500th point, just 20-some seconds later, Leon Draisaitl finds the back of the net as well. So the Oilers get 2 goals early like that, and they were able to play with the lead a little bit. Before we get into some other post-game audio from that win over Winnipeg, here's the Oilers captain, Connor McDavid, on picking up career point number 500.
It's a little milestone, I guess. A little thing along the way here, which is nice. And to see to feel some of the reaction from my teammates and friends and family and stuff like that. It's always special. So I really appreciate the support and onward.
So McDavid gets the second assist on that first goal, and while they're still celebrating that one, it's quickly 2-0. The captain also talked about just the importance of grabbing that early lead and playing from in front against a team like Winnipeg.
Anytime you can play with the lead, it's always easier. It's tough to chase the game, but I thought they did a good job of sticking with it and getting themselves back into it. And I thought we did a good job of kind of holding them at arm's length. So, all in all, I thought it was a good start. Always nice to get too early and play with that lead.
So, credit to the Jets. They were eventually able to crawl back a little bit. Mark Scheifele got one right at the end of the first period with about 50-some seconds to go. It was a 2-1 game. And, a lot of special teams time in this one. In total, there were 11 power plays between the two teams, 5 for Winnipeg and 6 for Edmonton. And the officiating was, it was brutal in this one. Like, Darnell Nurse got called on a high stick at the end of the first period. That was soft, not even his stick that ended up hitting the guy. So after that, it felt like the refs just kind of got caught in this vicious cycle of makeup call after makeup call after makeup call, because the Lowry interference minor to start the second, that one was pretty poor. I thought the Jets got called on a couple other ones in the second period that probably didn't needed to be called. In the third period, you had Ryan Nugent-Hopkins get called on a slashing penalty that I think didn't need to be called at that point in the game either. Blake Wheeler on an interference call. Like, they were calling a lot of ticky-tack stuff is my point. But then they also missed like 3 or 4 high sticks throughout the game. So I don't know what was going on with the officiating. Like I said, a total of 11 power plays kind of disrupted the groove of that hockey game. But the Oilers did get a big goal with the man advantage. They did only end up going like 1 for 6. But that Leon Draisaitl second period goal, 3.5 minutes to go in that middle frame. You find the back of the net. You make that a 2-goal game before you head back into the room. That's huge. That's a moment in the game where your power play sort of switched up the momentum of things. And they gave up a goal in the third period as well with a nice slap shot from Neil Pionk. But after that, Mike Smith stood tall. He ends up posting a .943 save percentage in this one. He stops 33 of the 35 shots that he faced. And he was busy. You know, some people didn't love that Pionk goal, but I thought Smith was, excellent. The numbers speak for themselves. He was excellent between the pipes for the Edmonton Oilers, and he gets a lot of credit for that win on Wednesday. Here is Mike Smith just talking a little bit about what the team in front of him did and sort of what was the recipe for success in the win.
They're a good team. Hats off to them. They got some real good players over there, and they're gonna create chances. So obviously you're just trying to make saves at important times in the game when it's close, and we were able to get on the board early tonight and kind of get them chasing a little bit, and that always helps. So I think that's a big part of it. Obviously, when you get the lead, it's easier to not be chasing and be ahead. But they create a lot of offense by their top couple lines, and even their third and fourth lines are capable of contributing offensively. So they're a dangerous team up front, and we were able to kind of snuff them out a little bit there and get on the right side of it tonight.
There you go. That is Oilers goaltender Mike Smith talking a little bit about the dub over Winnipeg. And now Edmonton will look to keep it rolling, and they'll look to avoid suffering back-to-back losses to the Calgary Flames. When these two teams met a couple of Saturdays ago, it was the Flames coming out on top. It was a back-and-forth affair, but the Flames ended up winning by a score of 6-4 thanks to 3 goals in the third period. Edmonton did outshoot the Flames 32-28 in that hockey game. One difference, though, Edmonton's power play goes 1 for 5 in that hockey game. And you kind of wonder when you look back throughout the course of that game, if they would have picked up another power play goal somewhere and kind of went 2 for 5 when you're given 5 chances in a game. Honestly, I think you'd like to score 2 times more often than not. But, maybe Edmonton's power play could have flipped the momentum. The other side of that was they simply needed a save, and they just flat out didn't get it in that game against Calgary. When you go look at the game since then, that next game against Ottawa, they allowed 1 goal. Then they allowed 2 in the next game against the Senators. Then none in the game against the Habs. And Monday against the Jets wasn't great. But then you go back to Wednesday against Winnipeg. They only allowed 2 goals as well. So Edmonton didn't get the saves against Calgary last time they met. Edmonton's goaltending, in my opinion, has been a lot better from that point going forward. So that's going to be a big key here for Edmonton as they take on the Flames. Looking at that Flames team a little bit, they are coming off a 4-game set against the Vancouver Canucks when they found a way to get the split. And granted, now the Flames and Canucks are tied in the standings, but Calgary's played 4 less games than them. But that run of games kind of left some Flames fans feeling not so great about themselves. One of the wins, they had to bring it to overtime to get the win after giving up a late goal. Their offense wasn't exactly clicking either. They were held to 1 goal in both of their losses. They were outshot in 3 of those 4 games against the Canucks as well. So there's definitely some things that, it's not exactly going well, is my point, in Calgary. And that's something their head coach, Jeff Ward, talked about. And he voiced some of his frustrations after their 5-1 loss to Vancouver on Wednesday night.
Inconsistent. I think it's probably the best way. But we've been talking about that for a while now. It's time to put this thing to bed and take charge and take control of what we can. And we certainly can control the way we start. We certainly can control how we pay attention to details, how hard we compete, how much we care. All those things are certainly within our control. It's time for us to start giving a shit about it.
Really, it's somewhat sort of the same kind of issues that the Oilers are facing, where costly turnovers, not paying attention to details at certain moments, that appears to be what's costing the Flames in these games. You go back, that 5-1 loss against against Vancouver, there were, on basically the first 3 goals, I think you could probably find a moment where a Flames player made a mistake pretty shortly before the goal went in. Jacob Markstrom as well on the Horvat goal was way out of his crease once again. I wonder if Jacob Markstrom's getting a little bit worn down from how much he has to play. I'll have more on that in just a second here, but both these sides are making mistakes recently. So it's basically, I think, going to be whoever can sort of establish their game and stay concentrated and not be turning over pucks, like that and the special teams battle are the two things I'm keeping an eye on, because neither of these teams have been particularly good at 5-on-5 so far this year. According to Natural Stat Trick, in 5-on-5 shots for percentage, Edmonton is 27th in the NHL. The Calgary Flames are 25th. So, dominating at 5-on-5 is not something either of these two teams have done particularly well. But in my opinion, this game is going to come down to two things. Especially for the Oilers, limit the mistakes you make at 5-on-5. And if you do make mistakes, you better hope your goaltender makes you a save. But still, limit your mistakes at 5-on-5. That'll be a big one. And find a way to produce on the power play. Edmonton's power play just 3 for 16 in their last 5 games. The Flames power play is only 2 for 14 in their last 5 games. So you could probably say the same thing on the Flames side of this. Like if they find a way to limit their mistakes and they produce on the power play, they're probably sitting there going, hey, there's a good chance for us to get 2 points. But that's absolutely the keys to victory for either side in this one, but particularly for the Oilers. Moving along on the Oilers Nation pregame podcast brought to you by Yegburger and Nation Beer. Let's get to your expected lineups for tonight's game. And your expected lineups are brought to you by Deuce Vodka. Available now. Ask your local liquor stores to bring in Deuce Vodka. Give them a follow. Deuce Vodka on Instagram, and you will quickly see this is the vodka friend of the nation, Brett Kissel, country music star as well. So check it out. It's an exciting new product. I'm a firm believer in supporting local with your liquor choices. So this podcast has you covered now. If you like the hard stuff, Deuce Vodka. If you're a beer drinker, go for Nation Beer. It's perfect. Lineup combos brought to you by Deuce Vodka. Let's start with the home team here tonight, the Calgary Flames, and they just had an optional skate today, so we didn't get a real good look at what their lineup will look like, but here's what we're expecting. Elias Lindholm centering the Oiler killer himself, Andrew Mangiapane, Matt Tkachuk on the right side. The second line has Sean Monahan with Johnny Gaudreau and Brett Ritchie right now on the right side, but I wonder if that might change a little bit. Michael Backlund with Dylan Dubé and Milan Lucic is the third line for the Flames. Milan Lucic in his last 5 games has a goal and an assist. The fourth line, Sam Bennett centering Dominic Simone and Joachim Nordstrom, the D pairings for Calgary. Hanifin with Tanev, Giordano with Juuso Välimäki, and Connor Mackey with Rasmus Andersson. The Flames' top power play unit has Sean Monahan with Johnny Gaudreau, Elias Lindholm, Matt Tkachuk, and on the blue line, actually, expect to see some Juuso Välimäki back there. The Flames looking for a spark on their power play. They're just 2 for 14 in their last 5 games. For the Edmonton Oilers in this one, one change to their forward group. I'll start at the top, though, where things stay the same. It's McDavid with Nuge and Puljujärvi. It is Leon Draisaitl with Kyler Yamamoto, and it is expected to be Tyler Ennis back in that slot. I know Dominic Cahoon went back up to that second line for a little bit at the end of the game, but I personally liked what we got from Tyler Ennis on the second line, so he stays with Draisaitl and Yamamoto to kick things off. On the third line, Jujhar Khaira with Josh Archibald and Dominic Cahoon. The fourth line, Gaetan Haas will stay in the lineup, and I know he's just a fourth line center, but in my opinion, this team just plays a lot different with Haas in the lineup. When you have that fourth line center who can skate as well as he has, there's offense to his game, and maybe hasn't shone through fully so far in his few games this year, but there's offense there with Gaetan Haas, and I think having him in that bottom 6 really changes up the dynamic of things. He'll be centering a line that has Alex Chason and James Neal on it, so expect to see a bit of James Neal here. Would also expect Neal to be that net front presence on the Oilers' top power play, although in my opinion, we should be seeing a whole lot more of Jesse Puljujärvi in that spot. The D pairings for the Oilers, Darnell Nurse with Tyson Barrie, Chris Russell with Adam Larson, and that duo, I'd say they passed the test against Winnipeg on Wednesday, but I wouldn't give them an A grade or a B grade. I'd give them more of like a C grade. They did enough to survive, and I guess that's all Dave Tippett wants out of that duo, but they really struggled to move the puck, so I wouldn't have minded seeing things get shaken up a little bit in the bottom 4 for the D pairings, but I kind of understand that Dave Tippett in a big game like this against Calgary wants to go with who he trusts. And if you look at the minutes from last game, he clearly trusts Russell and Larson. He had them going over the boards every second shift in that third period. The third pairing for the Oil also stays the same. It's Slater Cuckoo with Evan Bouchard, who busted up the pregame podcast bet of the game. He did not get over 2.5 shots on goal in this one. That drops our record to 2-8 for the pregame podcast bet of the game. And I mean, he had 2 shots on goal in like his second shift of the game, and then Dave Tippett stopped playing him. So I'm actually not mad about the bet. I still think it was a good bet. The research was there. Just a couple of bad breaks did not go my way with that one. I'll have more on the bet of the game in just a second here, but first, the starting goaltenders in this one. I'll start with the Oilers, where this one's kind of obvious. It's Mike Smith, 3-0 so far through 4 games. Of course, he did get pulled, but didn't get tagged with a loss against Winnipeg on Monday night. Smith on the year has a .207 goals against average and a .938 save percentage. In his time with Edmonton in Battles of Alberta, Mike Smith is 2-1-0 with an .868 save percentage and a .329 goals against average. His numbers in Battles of Alberta aren't actually that good when he's been an Oiler, but when he's been a Flame taking on the Oilers, his numbers are actually a lot better, so go figure. Mike Smith, last time out, stopped 33 of 35 against the Jets on Wednesday. Opposite him, I assumed it would be Jacob Markstrom, but all reports out of Calgary, and Jeff Ward confirmed this actually in his availability, David Rittich will make the start. Nicknamed Big Save Dave, but lately, or at least this season, he has not exactly been living up to that moniker. Through 3 games and 2 starts this year, he does not have a win. He has a .323 goals against average and an .868 save percentage. His last time out, he stopped all 4 shots that he faced against the Vancouver Canucks in a relief appearance, but the start before that, he allowed 3 goals on 28 shots. Rittich has appeared in 8 games against the Edmonton Oilers in his career. He is 4-3-0 with a .907 save percentage and a .278 goals against average. He always seems to bring it against the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, you remember the stick flip moment and all of that kind of stuff that went into the rivalry last season. So, listen, it was a little bit shocking to see that Jeff Ward opted to go with his backup in Game 1. But to me, I view this as the Flames going for broke a little bit. They're trying to get all 4 points out of this weekend, and to do that, you would assume your team is going to be more rested and a little bit more sharp on home ice in Game 1. So go with your backup, because I'm assuming Jeff Ward is sitting there saying, Game 2, Saturday night in Edmonton, Oilers have the last change. My guys might be a little bit more tired. Game 2 is probably when you would need your goaltending to steal you one. So I can understand the thought process behind Jeff Ward going with Dave Rittich tonight. I will say, though, if the Oilers get the 2 points in this one, that suddenly puts a ton of pressure on the Flames tomorrow coming in to Rogers Place. But for tonight, the Oilers will be looking to win their 2nd in a row and look to even up the season series against the Calgary Flames. Let's get into your betting preview tonight, courtesy of our friends at oddshark.com. Oddshark.com, all the sports betting information you need to make the sharper play. Their supercomputer is predicting an Oilers win tonight. They're saying 3.8 to 2, so the supercomputer says the Oilers will win and the total will go under. The money line in this one, it's pretty much a pick 'em, -110 on either side. There is a little bit more public money coming in on the Edmonton Oilers, according to Oddshark. The over-under in this one is set at 6.5. Again, my rule, and I am not going to break this, I'm not touching the over-under in this one. Could I see David Rittich and Mike Smith both playing well in this game ending 4-2? Yup, that would mean an under. Could I see this being another 6-4 shootout like it was when these two teams met earlier in the year? I absolutely could. So I'm not touching the over-under in this one, but where I will go with the pregame podcast bet of the game is a Connor McDavid prop. He's been shooting the puck a lot. So I'm going to the McDavid shot total. It's set at 3.5. I'm taking the over in that one. He has had over 3.5 shots in 3 straight games now. And on top of that, he hit this number against the Calgary Flames in the first meeting of the year. So McDavid, shot total over 3.5, paying -105 is your pregame podcast bet of the game. 10-8 on the year, and we are up around 0.7 of a unit. So this would be a nice win for the pregame podcast bet of the game. I mentioned it's a pick'em on the money line. The Oilers in regulation is paying +160, and the Oilers on the spread, which is a goal and a half, is paying +275. Another bet I'd keep an eye on here. The Oilers lead the league in first period goals, and the Flames have been getting off to some brutal starts lately. I would take a look at the Oilers on the first period money line, which is -112, or taking the Oilers to flat out win the first period at +180. Those are some interesting bets to me. I think we could see the Oilers get off to a hot start tonight, and the Flames have been floundering early so far this season. That's your betting report brought to you by Oddshark. It's Smith versus Rittich between the pipes. 7 o'clock start tonight as the Oilers take on the Calgary Flames. Right now in the North Division standings, Edmonton is 3 points up on the Flames, but the Flames have 2 games in hand. So if you sort by winning percentages, these two teams are neck and neck for that final playoff spot. It's a big set of games. It'll be a fun weekend. Friday, Saturday night, Battles of Alberta. Like I said, gets going tonight at 7. Thanks for tuning in to the pregame podcast brought to you by Yeg Burger. Check them out on Instagram, YEG_burger. And Nation Beer. Pick up a 4-pack from your local liquor store. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk, and I will talk to you once again tomorrow to get you set for part 2 of this weekend's Battle of Alberta.
You've been listening to the Oilers Nation pregame podcast brought to you by Yeg Burger. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.